Whoa. Gerby. Yup. I pull up with that Chinese strap. I don't know what that means. Let me try again. Look, I'm such a silly little guy. I'm touching on your sister's thigh. I be looking to the sky. I gotta ask God why. I be eating Five Guys. Got a burger and some fries. I be doing drive-bys. I just shot like 5 guys. Yeah, wait. Hold on. These hoes just want me for my chicken wings. Sorry, I tried to switch it up. I don't know what I'm doing. Gerby tried to switch it up. You know, when you're like a talented artist, you know, not every experiment you try is going to work out. But I'm a trailblazer. And when you trailblaze, it's not always going to pan out, but you take these risks because you're a man, you know, and you go forward and you trailblaze. So that's that. What I wanted to talk about was competition. It seems to me that the whole world is kind of one big competition. But there's a discrepancy here. Just making sure everything was stopped. There's a discrepancy or disagreement as to whether it should or shouldn't be this way. In my perspective, and I can only go off of my personal experiences, everywhere I look, I see a hierarchy. In every group of people, there is always a hierarchy, whether we try to go against it or not. And I think the best system we could have is a hierarchy where even people at the bottom live a life that is sustainable or has a nice basic needs met. You know, even serfs of a prosperous kingdom have wives and money and food and shelter. And, you know, possibly routes to self-actualization, free time to do things like that. And that's good. What we have now is you know, it's becoming haves and have-nots. I've talked about this so much, but people towards the bottom of the hierarchy, specifically men, you know, we're coming to the point where they don't have these basic needs met. So we have a bad system. And you could argue this is just the natural conclusion of capitalism, whatever. This is getting outside of my depth. I just talk about what I know. Everywhere I look, I see a hierarchy. Might have talked about this a little bit before, but everything is just a competition, you know? Jobs are a competition. Relationships are a competition. You have to compete for love. Love isn't unconditional. Love isn't something that comes to you because you're yourself and you're a human who is entitled to love. You have to fight for love. You have to beat other people for love. You have to fight for someone's attention so they prefer you. So they you know, don't look at anybody else but you. It's selective. Love is selective. It's not universal. Or at least human love, maybe a true, whatever, transcendent love is universal. But I'm talking about folks here. And everywhere I look, I see competition. I see a hierarchy. It seems the world is just one large competition. And this is sort of what growing up signifies for me, is realizing that things aren't just going to come to you, that you have to beat other people and try and outcompete to earn what you want or what you need as a human. It's a zero-sum game. Money and relationships and social capital, physical capital, all of it. And when I was a kid, you're taught about, you had this societal narrative of unconditional love, and we can all hold hands and be kumbaya, and everybody could work together to reach a higher spot. Well, I don't know. There kind of has to be winners and losers. That's how I see it. Anytime we try to go against this natural flow of hierarchy, try to make everybody the same, doesn't work. Maybe ideally it would. Maybe there is a way it would work. But I haven't seen it. When I was a kid, your parents, you feel special. I grew up in a loving household, and you feel special. Everybody's giving you this attention. You're perfect. You could do anything you want. And I remember there was this big. It was kind of a. I'm not going to say traumatic. I don't want to sound like a little hoe, but when you go to school, when you first go to school, after being raised in this environment, and there's this big discrepancy where you're like, I don't feel special here at all. All these kids are better than me at something. Maybe I was good at certain things, but there was always all these kids better than me at stuff. I don't feel special there. You're just another kid, and tons of other, kids outcompete you in status or, athleticism or intelligence. I've always just been a guy who's like sort of good at like multiple categories. I'm like a jack of all trades, master of none sort of feller. That's whatever. But yeah, at school you go there, you're like, here I feel absolutely invisible, or just totally the opposite. And every time in school, it's this Darwinian environment. And in every school, I went to multiple schools, you see the hierarchy play out every single time. And it's hard for me to be like, oh, no, this is just a coincidence. And even outside of school, but I think it's the most perfect example. You're putting all these kids in this place when they're growing up, and later on their hormones are raging. The first thing you do in school, or first thing kids do, is pick on someone weaker than them or lower than them, without exception. It's not always like in anime where these guys are like throwing rocks or like punching him in the gut, shoving him in lockers, kicking him in the crotch while he's laying on the ground bleeding. Like, it's not that dramatic. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's possible it's like that. But, it could be social exclusion. It could be talking behind someone's back and they're sitting alone. It could be, playing little pranks on them. Girls will be like, go ask him out. It's a funny joke. And the guy's like, oh, really? She's asking me out? Shit like that. It comes in one form or another. The person at the bottom of the hierarchy is picked on because people higher that they step on their backs gives them more status. And this is, I don't know, it just seems to me like that's just the true animalistic human nature. Not to say everything is a zero-sum game. I think that's a bit of a half-truth. There are symbiotic relationships where we could work together, but it's not one or the other. A hierarchy is always present. And in many ways, to live is to succeed is to bring down others. That's a bit of a half-truth, but if you think about it, it applies in a lot of forms. The phones we use are created by terrible working conditions. These little kids building these phones, and they have nets. They have nets around some of these buildings, so when the kids try to jump off and kill themselves, the net catches them and they go back to work. Pretty awful stuff, so we can have our little phones or our shoes or our clothes. But our society is profiting off of their failure, and every society is built off of indentured servants or slaves. This is how every culture did it. And this is how humans work. Maybe ideally we should get rid of that. I don't know. As I said, just like my personal way of looking at it is that hierarchies are good, but there are healthy and unhealthy hierarchies. Right now we are living in an unhealthy hierarchy, and a healthy hierarchy, even those at the bottom are living decent, They're no king. Not everybody can be a king. But what you can have is a prosperous kingdom where, whether they be serfs or merchants, they're doing good. They have what they need. And sort of piggybacking off this idea, there's this whole thing where you shouldn't compare yourself to others. This is what Jordan Peterson says. It's like rule 3 or 4 in his book. Don't compare yourself to who other people are today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. I don't know if that's exactly how he puts it, but it's incremental growth by comparing yourself to yourself and measuring those metrics. And that's a good thing to promote. But I do see problems with that. I'm not a Jordan Peterson hater or anything. I'm not actually like super familiar with him. I respect him. I respect him. Maybe he's a little out of touch because he's old or whatever. I feel like he doesn't know. I feel like he said some stuff before that's just like go. I don't know. Maybe a little dismissive of the unique problems we face today as young men. He might not know about, but slob on my knob, like corn on the cob. Lay on the bed and give me head. Jordan Peterson. Oh yeah, right there. Oh Nelly. Oh, sweet Mary. Goodness gracious. Oh, dragon of chaos. Oh, Miss Piggy. Little Timmy. I guess that was Jordan Peterson getting head and then morphing into Kermit the Frog. What was I talking about? So Jordan Peterson, that's what he advocates for, incremental growth. But I have like, there's some problems with that, because number one, as I've already sort of talked about, the world is a competition, and you have to beat other people to rise up the hierarchy and get what you want economically or socially. And in order to do that, you have to compare. You have to compare to compete. And another problem is competition isn't a bad thing. There's healthy competition. And comparing and competition, you see the linguistics of how, whatever. They're connected. They're correlated. That's the point. You can't have one without the other. And there's healthy competition. That helps us all get better. Men, our testosterone increases when we're in competition. It's a good thing to compare. The argument you could make is that through the advent of the internet, we're comparing at such a large scale that it's led to our detriment. And there's a good point there. But even then, I think a lot of motivation I've got to start this or start working harder and on stuff like that is through comparing myself, even to people on the internet. Because you do it and you get this bad feeling, you get this inferior feeling, this insecurity. And what most people do is they just, that's just it, and they let it simmer down. They go play video games or like just just makes them feel bad, and they curl up in a little ball and take it like a bitch. But, you know, on his best days, Gerbert didn't do that. Gerbert used that energy and tried hard. And it gave him motivation to do stuff. I feel like I've talked about it before, you know. It helped me progressing guitar faster, looking at these guys who are good at guitar. There are all these, there's a history of, you know, when an athletic record gets broken, all the top competing athletes, you know, everybody thinks this record is impossible to beat, so they're not striving for that. Their mind is inhibiting themselves, but they don't know it. One person breaks this record, and then like just a few weeks later, tons of other people have broken it because they see that competition and they push themselves harder. Competition makes us all better. And it's great. It's a good thing to do. At the surface of it, all this, you know, the world is a competition and you have to fight for love and fight for everything. You can't just be yourself. It might seem dark, but if you think about it, there's no other way it could be. There's a limited amount of resources. And if you didn't have to fight for these things, you wouldn't really appreciate them. And also, building off that, competition is beautiful. In these deep moments of competition, it forces you to be in the moment. You know, if you're really immersed in a game or some sort of sport, and you're deep in that competition, it's the same thing with deep work or something like that. These are beautiful moments where you're looking back. I mean, you might not realize it, but if you really focus, if you really think about what happens in these moments where you're in deep work or deep in a competition, or, you know, they say the same thing. You're one with everything. And it's pretty nice. They say the same thing with nutting. When you nut, you're not thinking about anything else. And a similar thing happens with deep work or in that in that sort of environment. And that's when you're closer to God. But the problem with, you know, Jordan, it's interesting because Jordan Peterson has a sort of, that's the sort of more deterministic or blackpill view, is that because in the chapter he writes something to the effect of, you know, you're comparing yourself to all these people, but someone's always going to be better than you, and, you know, chances are you're not that smart. You're not, because you're comparing yourself, especially through the advent of the internet, to top 0.01% of people. You're just not that smart. You just don't have that aptitude. You just don't have those genetics, that athletic ability. And there's definitely something to that too. But this is devolving into, again, a free will versus determinism thing, which I've, you know, it's a horse I've beaten a whole lot on this channel. Even though it's interesting, I don't know the answer, and neither do you. Even the most intelligent philosophers, these super intellectual folks, exhibited some sort of epistemic humility when talking about these topics this complex. But I'm sure you know, right? You fucking bellend. So, there's that. I'll leave it at that.